Here, just a short 12 years, but I lived in the adjacent township of South Ed for 48 years before that. I'm very familiar with this area, and I would like to remind some of the people here who sort of snickered at Elizabeth's statement that in 2012, coal produced 57% of the electricity. As of right now, it's 39%, and 37% of the electricity in this country is produced by natural gas. If you are that opposed to natural gas, I please beg you, take these poisons out of your home, because you're killing your children every time you turn on that stove and cook. It is the exact same gas that they are compressing. It has been stripped of its primary byproducts at the Bark West plant. It is being transported along to be used as a consumption for industrial and residential purposes. If those people who are so opposed to the development and the production and transmission of natural gas are truly that adamant, they will go home and immediately curtail the use of gas in their home. We as a community and we as a country have always faced toils and trials. Initially, when trains were brought out, they were fearful they were going to spook horses and kill people. And then boilers were going to explode and the world was going to end. And at one point, yes, this government did not do enough to control pollution. And yes, at one point in time, the rivers were unsafe to drink, swim in, or even to be close to. That has changed. We are now to a point where we are trying to micromanage and put everybody in a bubble wrap environment to make them absolutely risk-free, to never chase harm or any injuries in their lives. We are not able to do so. This is the United States. I really do feel somewhat repulsed by the fact that someone can buy a piece of property and then feel that their rights now extend a mile down the road to a man who owns a piece of property who has other designs on what he wants to do. I personally own a farm. I personally own 200 acres. Excuse me, I didn't interrupt anybody when they were speaking. I personally own a 200-acre farm, and I want drilling on my property. I'm willing to put up with a well for that 6 or 9 months that it might be an inconvenience within the sight of my home, knowing that it's going to be a permanent improvement to myself, my family, and this community. These attempts by people to say that there's no reason for progress must become the Luddites of today and go back to the point where they do not consume any energy, they do not create any pollution, and they do not consume any of the products that are manufactured by these gas products. Until that happens, there is no justification. This is nothing more than NIMBY. NIMBY, for those who don't know, is not in my backyard. NIMBY says that everybody should be able to live their life in peace, harmony, and tranquility and utopia. That isn't going to happen. I am going to be inconvenienced greatly. I'm losing 35 acres of my valued farm to the South Beltway. I'm not happy with it. I fought to get the best deal that I could for myself, but I accepted progress. Because think of this. Every time you drive to Pittsburgh, you're driving through some late farmer's field in some rural neighborhood so that you can have the convenience to live out here in Cecil, in the beauty and the natural environment. It does not give you the right, because you purchased a piece of property, to bestow your desires and your intentions on landowners who have other ideas that are different from yours. I firmly represent landowners who can have control over their property, and yes, everybody who has their property can control their own. I will not come to your neighborhood and tell you you can't paint your house pink, purple, or green. I will not tell you you cannot barbecue in your backyard. Do not come to my property. Do not try to impose your will on other people just because you live somewhere. Thank you.
Before we go on, I'd like to talk for a minute about what he just mentioned. He's talking about the zoning laws, okay? And if you take a look at what's going on, this whole procedure here is a lot more about whether we want this compressor station or not. It has to do with your zoning and how zoning affects the community. You know, the whole gist of what Act 13 talked about was the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States gives you several different rights. Two of them is the due process. The other is equal protection under the law. That's a constitutional basing for zoning. It's a restriction on everybody, but it's also a protection. In other words, it says you have to put compatible uses in each zone. So you know what, if you live in a residential zone, you can't put an industrial use in there. That's a constitutional violation, okay, under the 14th Amendment. Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania Constitution already says, too, it says citizens have a right to clean air, fresh water, and to protect these for generations to come in the future. I've looked at this also, and what that means, too, is the fact that if you're going to put something onto that property, that goes back to that protection now. You cannot harm your neighbor. You know, that zoning says you can't go ahead and do something that's going to affect your neighbor, but also affects your neighbor from doing that same thing to you. And if it has to do, we're not talking right now, whenever we're done you can talk. So that's basically saying, that's what zoning's about. Zoning puts restrictions on you. Whether you like it or not, you say, I can do what I want to do with my property. No, you can't when you have zoning in a community. And it also goes to the section further here, it says, when we all as officials here were elected and took an oath of office, it was to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Constitution. And so when you're saying that we don't think that these constitutional rights mean anything to you, well, if you vote not to go ahead and take and push this forward and say, look, this is a compressor station, it's in a light industrial, it should be in a heavy industrial, you're saying that you don't believe in the Constitution. And we've been sworn to uphold the Constitution. You take a whole if I believe that or not. That's the basis for zoning, is a constitutional.
Where is heavy industrial within this township? Where is it?
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. That was obviously a very spirited speech on a long call. But I'd like to talk to folks this evening. My name is Doug Warzinski, 111 Ashland Court, in the Timber Run plant. First off, I'd like to thank the supervisors for this opportunity to speak with you this evening and address this important decision you're facing tonight. I have three main themes that I'd like to cover with my comments. First is taking actions tonight to protect the health, safety, and welfare of all residents within Cecil Township from both MarkWest and Range Resources. As MarkWest continues to it continues on its quest to defy Cecil's Unified Development Ordinance and build a compressor station where it does not belong. Second, I would like to address Supervisor Cowden and her personal relationship with the oil and gas industry, and also any other supervisor, for that matter, who would potentially have a conflict of interest in this vote this evening. Third is the vote itself. Appealing the most recent PA Commonwealth Court's judge's ruling, a ruling that did not seem to recognize the ruling of the PA Supreme Court regarding zoning and Act 13. As it pertains to the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of all residents, I use those words specifically. At the beginning of each township ordinance, or at least all of the ones that I've read so far, in the first whereas, those words appear. I believe as township supervisors, you have a fiduciary responsibility to uphold that power. Act solely in what is the best interest of all residents, and not just the company or the potential few that may profit. Building a compressor station that is that close to both a school and a densely populated residential area makes no sense. And that is why it was originally zoned, or was not zoned, for heavy industry in the first place. Specifically to Supervisor Cowden, I believe it's been documented that you and or direct members of your family have leases or other contractual agreements with Range Resources.
You can't pick on one person on the board. That's what I was told.
In this case,
No, you're not.
Yes, you do have a right to ask a question. Many supervisors have had questions directed at them.
Oh, now you're changing. Yeah, you did. You said that.
It's not an attack. Don't attack, just ask it a
please
question.
allow me to change my comment. To all supervisors who may have a contract with or an arrangement with Range Resources, a primary business partner of MarkWest, who stands to gain from this station being built. There is obviously a conflict of interest between what could benefit you personally as a supervisor versus what could be best interest of all residents.
I'll be more than happy to answer your question.
When I'm finished. To eliminate any doubt of profiteering
I will
or...
not, wait a minute, I will not remember everything you're asking me, so you better...
Give her a chance to talk.
I haven't asked you a question.
Well, you already asked 2 questions, and now you want to talk about profiteering?
Finish, go ahead.
Can I please, would you ask me the first question?
Go ahead.
I'll be happy to respond.
Let me know when I can.
Ask me the first question again, and I'll be happy to respond.
Do you have any, you or a member of your family have any contract, leases, or financial arrangements with Range Resources or MarkWest?
I have nothing to do with MarkWest. What was that question again? Repeat it.
Range Resources.
Do you have any contractual agreement, lease?
Stop. Yeah, with Range Resources?
Yes.
Absolutely. 2 years ago, I, along with my husband...
Ms. Cowan, you don't have to.
No, I'm more than
You don't have to
happy.
get into the specifics of it if you don't want to.
I'm more than happy to
I'm just
respond.
advising you, you don't have to. Okay, but she doesn't have to.
My husband and I leased 5.97 acres in Cross Creek Township and 32 acres in Cross Creek Township to Range Resources. I'm sure that everyone knows because Cindy Fisher and Jesse White blasted it all over the place. And I was happy to do it. No, I want to finish what I was
That's
saying.
fine, but you don't need to take a personal attack
I
against me.
can't.
He just took it against Elizabeth.
You want to answer his question?
I'm going to answer this
Tax
question.
is just answer
Tell
the
me
question.
what to do. Okay, now I want to think about that. If I had not, well, first of all, the reason I did it was purely an economic decision. Because they were small tracts of land. If we had, of oil and gas rights, if we had not done it, they would have sucked out all the gas and anything. So we did lease it to them. And I would like to further answer that question, that if we had not leased the property, I would not have been able to be, along with my husband, so generous to our fire departments or to the people, including Kathy Helbling, who won one of the prizes that I donated at the Fall Festival, or the many prizes that I donated at the Cash Bash. Continue to donate heavily because we are fortunate enough to have the oil and gas leases. I donate heavily to our community. Now, I've answered your question.
Thank you. And really what you do with those proceeds?
Just a minute, as to my family, frankly, it's none of your business or anyone else's what they do.
You've given me more than I've ever asked for. Okay? Because my concern is not what to do with those proceeds. My concern is the potential obvious, or I would say obvious, conflict of interest between what could be beneficial for you versus what could be beneficial for all the residents of Cecil.
And everything
To eliminate any potential conflict of interest or any even inflection or idea of profiteering, I believe it would make most sense for you to recuse yourself from this evening's vote.
Sit down.
Finally, on the appeal itself,
I do not have any interest at this time in Cecil Township.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I do not have any interest in an oil and gas lease at
Oh.
this time in Cecil Township. But what I would like to say is maybe the others who have no interest whatsoever should recuse themselves because maybe they're so prejudiced against it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate your comments, but I'm not sure that's what we're deciding this evening. Finally, on the appeal itself.
Let me make one more comment. Whether or not this compressor station at this location, I cannot be profiteering, as you say, in any way, or gaining in any respect, because it's nowhere near anything that could affect me.
I don't know that, but I will take your word, I will take your word for it.
Cross Creek Township is a direct line to Mark West in Church.
I will take your word for it.
Thank you.